Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio. I'm your co-host, Ruthie, here, and I'm not here with Thomas this time. Instead, I have three co-hosts with me, and we're going to be talking about Take Back the Night and all kinds of related stuff that's super good. One of my co-hosts is
Heather Elizabeth.
And I'm also here with
Selena
and
Jessica St. Peter.
And Jessica, can you tell us about your role with Take Back the Night?
Yeah, so I am the chair of the Take Back the Night committee, and I am the public educator with Guelph Wellington Women in Crisis.
And Selena, you've been involved with Take Back the Night now in other communities, and then also now this year in the Guelph area. And how long have you been doing stuff with Take Back the Night and attending?
I've been attending Take Back the Night in Kitchener for about 10 years, just being part of the crowd and carrying signs and doing the march and being part of the rally. And this year I am going to be a speaker at Guelph's Take Back the Night.
You're going to be like the speaker. Like the big speaker at Guelph's Take Back, no pressure. With your amazing 17-minute speech that you were talking about when we were discussing a little bit earlier. And you'll be talking a little bit about your story and messages for survivors and things like that. So I'm quite excited. That you're someone who's been in the crowd for other Take Back the Nights for so long is, going to have that presence be up front. That's great. Thank you for doing it.
In 10 years, that's a long time. What keeps you coming back to Take Back the Night specifically as something you want to be a part of, like not just as a person who's attended, but now as a speaker?
What keeps me coming back is the importance of the message that Take Back the Night is giving people, that people can be safe and live in a safe community and have community to support them and be there for them. And being a survivor myself, the message I have of just that you're not alone and that there are people out there. And I have a little boy, so it's very important for me to teach him all of the safety and things that he needs to know about growing up in this world. So I just want to give a message, and I hope that I am able to give a message.
So since this is radio, nobody will see what's happening. But I am wondering if the four of us, if people are comfortable, if you are also a survivor, I won't say your name. Would you feel like raising your hand? So we have a majority of people at the table who would identify that way. And I think it is really, myself included. And I think it is really important for people to be able to hear that message and hear from someone who has that solidarity idea in mind. And last year's theme, Jessica, if I remember correctly, was to do with We Believe Survivors.
That's this year's theme.
This year's theme
is We Believe Survivors.
Ooh, okay.
Last year's was Intersecting Identities.
Two really good themes, yeah. So Believing Survivors is this year's theme, which, how relevant to have someone who's been participating in marches for a long time and being upfront to share that story and that value. Jessica, what does Take Back the Night mean to you just as a thing?
It's hard. So I've been with Guelph Wellington Women in Crisis for 7 years. So it's kind of like Groundhog Day in a way, because you plan events and it's like you plan the same events every year. But at the same time, it is my favorite event that we co-host in the community because of the space that it creates and the message that it stands for. And I think just seeing the progress in terms of how we can make changes or adaptations so that people feel more included, because it just blows my mind that there would be people that don't want to support it. And taking that responsibility on to minimize the barriers that would prevent anyone from attending, or to do our best to consider the different lived experiences and being accountable for our place as an organization in our community that says we're a feminist organization and that we're working towards ending violence. So to me, all of that plays in, and I also love just the energy within the crowd. And for some people, it's one of the few events that they attend, and they leave kind of looking forward to when it's going to happen again. And tonight...
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, and tonight to have a little girl who's under 10 years old say, I'm so excited for the next march. When do we get to march again? And just because to her, she's like, I get to run on the street.
Mm-hmm.
I get to be as loud as I want. And her mom is also a survivor who shared her story at Take Back the Night. And so just seeing that generational change, that's why it's important to me.
Very nice. And for folks who aren't familiar with Take Back the Night, it happens in lots of different cities all over the world. And I don't know how long ago it started. Does anybody here know?
1976.
Look
was
at you.
The first march.
Oh, that's
Wow.
amazing. Thank you, Selena.
Do you know where it was?
New York City.
She's got that too.
It's
Amazing.
like Trivial Pursuit.
So this thing that's been around since 1976, you said, right? And so it's international in scope. It happens all over the place, and often there's some sort of starting with a gathering where people share some kind of stories. There might be community resource tables available, or maybe not. And there might be kind of some moments of silence or recognition or processing, and it looks different every place you go. And then usually from there, at least in my experience, I can't speak for the whole world, there's a march. So it might be on the streets, it might be on the sidewalk, it might be through a campus or through some other organization where people want to be seen. And the point is to create a sense of community and unity for survivors and around survivors at the same time. Would you say that that's accurate? And awareness, and then it's in the purpose of demanding change and improvement in violent situations, especially around gender or sexuality. Some focus on just violence against women. Other Take Back the Nights are a little more broad. Yeah.
So I've never participated in a Take Back the Night that allows men. So Guelph allows men.
Yes.
So I'm happy about that. I have a male friend coming. Which I was happy about, that he would be able to attend and actually march with us.
Yeah. In my work as a therapist and running workshops, it can be difficult to find resources of any sort for male survivors of violence, for males who are loved ones of someone who's a violent survivor, but also for women who have survived violence at the hands of other women too, have often not felt like places that are very heteronormative in the way they do Take Back the Night can serve them well. At the same time, I can see having dedicated space for dedicated things as well. Even if I don't personally feel as great about it, I can see the value for it and the importance of having that out there. So you'll continue to be doing it as an all-gender sort of thing. Is that new for Guelph, or has it always been that way?
Sorry for the pause. It's something that every year comes up, and we have a discussion because we don't, I understand the value historically of that women's only space. And I think that in the past they've tried to, look at how other people can participate. Sometimes it's been, okay, people who don't identify as women at the back, but then women felt like they were being followed. Then they were like, okay, well, men on the sidewalk. And then women felt like they were being surrounded. So it was just conversations that came up. And I think for me, it was recognizing the large community, the queer community, and people who don't identify as women, but still are at such a heightened risk of experiencing gender-based violence, not feeling like they could participate or feeling recognized at the event. So it's definitely something that I advocated for, and there's mixed feelings both ways.
Yeah.
But, the community's response is what continues to keep it that way.
Okay. So many considerations of this, and I think with a wealth of reasons why on every side. So as you're talking about some of the gender things, I think about myself as a non-binary person and how if it's a women's only event, I tend to feel like I shouldn't be there out of respect for the women there, but also feel like I'll get misgendered enough, everybody will assume I'm a woman anyway. So having that open space I know is valuable for me, but I'm sure people have a wealth of preferences on what will make them feel most safe and how to run things. That's a lot for you to balance as an organizer.
Well, and I think at one point it was for self-identified women only. But I was like, the point of marshals is to keep people safe, not to be the gender police and walk up to somebody and say, how do you identify? Or I'm sorry, I'm reading you this way, right? And not only do I not want participants to go through that, but I also don't want our volunteers to be put in that position.
Right.
So to me, it doesn't make sense to not open the space. And definitely, if the feedback was that women were looking for a women-only space, then we would do whatever possible to make either a pre or post event where that space can take place.
Right.
So that if people want that reflective time or they want the freedom to speak without other folks being there, that we can make that happen. But as of right now, that hasn't been something that's been requested.
Yeah, fair. So it grows and evolves each year as it goes. Selena, you mentioned being a parent and it being really important for you that your son, you said, right, grows up with kind of knowledge and messages and learning around some of the things, some of the topics that come up at Take Back the Night. And I really liked you bringing in that because you have these multiple roles. You're a speaker, you're an attendee, you're a survivor, you're a mother, you're all the other different roles in your life that we haven't talked about. I'm wondering, what do you feel like the next generation is a place of hope, like things are getting better and moving in a good direction overall? Or are you kind of concerned for where it's going around topics of violence and gender and things like that?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It's a good
Answering
question.
as a mother,
Yeah,
I worry that it's not looking good.
it's not looking good.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the education and the systems that we have built that our children grow up in because we work or our kids go off somewhere during the day, whether it's school or daycare. I feel like it's not much better than when it was when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I say in my speech about like the things I want Nash to learn. My son's name is Nash.
Mm-hmm.
Like I teach him about his body and consent and just everything that I don't know. It's hard parenting.
Parenting is hard. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a scary world to be in. Like,
and how old is he?
he'll be 3 in December.
So these messages are starting young. And
Yeah.
it's important to be starting from the beginning.
And I mess up all the time as a parent. Like I was telling him all the time, no one touches your penis.
Mm-hmm.
And then my counselor was like, you can't say that though, because you touch his penis.
Mm-hmm.
His other mother touches his penis.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma touches his penis
Mm-hmm.
because he wears a diaper.
Right.
People bathe him
Mm-hmm.
so that he gets washed, right? But I kept saying, no one touches your penis.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, really wanted to get that through to him at a very young age. And then so he would tell me, don't touch my penis, Mama.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wouldn't touch it. But then I was like, God, I'm teaching him the wrong way. I shouldn't be telling
You
him
got that message really well.
Good job. Good job. Well done.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's hard. I'm learning. I work with a therapist and ask lots of questions
Mm-hmm.
to try and figure this parenting thing out.
Yeah. Well, it's not something that's easy to do by yourself with no one in consultation. And I know some people do it.
And I
but-
can't rely on society to teach him. I need to be the one to teach him.
Yeah. Heather, one of the reasons I wanted you to be here is because you're one of the people in my life who is kind of a mentor, or maybe I say a superhero around consent issues, which is very much in line with violence and awareness and prevention and things like that. Not that they're the same thing, but they all kind of hold hands with each other in different ways. And I'm hearing this about the starting the conversation young that Selena's talking about, which I think some people would say, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how to have that conversation with a child about anything to do as big as like consent and body and stuff. And on the other hand, I think, well, what day is that conversation going to be easier, and how much will you have to catch up on, and what will you have missed in the meantime? I know I'm constantly talking with grown-ups about how to raise their children to become sexually healthy adults, which I also wrap consent and stuff into. What goes through your mind when you're hearing this about what Selena's talking about with, starting this from a young age, but also not feeling super hopeful that you can just hand your kids off to others and trust them to get that information?
Yeah, there's a lot of complexities and there's a lot of different factors. I feel a little more hopeful with the implementation of some of the new sex ed curriculums in Ontario, like the fact that they've been reevaluated and that and again, this is very much from a consent-based perspective. I'm like, okay, at least they're talking about it. They're talking about bodily autonomy in younger grades now, and it's kind of like also delivering that message. Where it gets complicated, though, is that sometimes you're right. Sometimes people do touch your body in ways that you aren't super thrilled about, but you need, like maybe for medical interventions or for like wanting to keep your body clean. Also, there winds up being this pressure to know what kind of sexuality you want and to know what kind of experiences you want to have before you've ever had them. So then sometimes I worry that it's so complicated around exploration and around learning and making mistakes and making choices, and the idea that you can have some sexual regret that is different from sexual assault and different from anything that was coercive, and trying to like hold that, because it becomes a lot for one person to hold, right? How do you...
Well, these are really advanced social skills you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like advanced for any age and experience of grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yet this is what we ask of people, right?
We
like,
ask of kids, like teenagers who are figuring it out in preteens.
Who are just starting to navigate this along with like social power dynamics and like what will make them popular in school versus not. So these are moments where I'm like, whew, thank goodness I don't have kids. Because I know the population I'm working with is usually 18 plus. Yeah. And so I get to be the fun person who comes in and say like, no, you actually can negotiate what you want done with your body. And so if you just want to make out with your partner tonight, like that's okay. If you want sex that doesn't involve anyone's genitals and you want that to look a different way, like you can negotiate that. If what you want to do is just give each other massages and then everybody keeps their hands to themselves, like for the sexy part, and you guys can't see it because this is radio, but I'm air quoting sexy part. But negotiating that, but that is something like you have to understand as a possibility, right? So I get excited about the some of the freedom and the language and the new terms, with the way that we're kind of blowing up our understandings of sexuality, the way we're blowing up our understandings of gender. Some of this stuff feels like there's creative possibility, and in that I find hope for the future. But I'm 100% with you, Selena. Like I look around at the structures and the systems, and I look at what has been, and I don't see a lot to be excited about, but in these new spaces, I get more excited. And particularly, I do love Take Back the Night because it's a thing that you can bring your kids to, right? If you're looking for like an intro level to kind of like protesting, to like pushing back against the systems that are in your community, whether that's like the legal system or the police system or just partnering with other community groups that you might want to be involved with someday, you can. It feels weird to say that this is a family-friendly atmosphere, but the Take Back the Nights I've been to are very family-friendly, which is great because, again, it gets people in young, and so you can start having those conversations and opening up that possibility.
Right. And I can see people saying, well, folks are going to share their personal stories. Is it appropriate for kids to hear that? What do you think about that, Jessica? Do you think it's it's a big question?
My mind is still back on the education system, but so when I think about Take Back the Night and I think about sharing the story, I struggle a lot because I don't think there are enough spaces for survivors to share their story. And so when you have a space that is finally designated to that, and then we censor, like even during the time when Selena and I were meeting, the words that she would use to describe the situation were like, I instantly got defensive and was like looking around, right? We were at a coffee shop, and just the way she described something, there were people coming out and I saw their face and the shock in their face, right? And so I struggle with that because we silence almost in a way through the event, because we have this idea that, okay, I need to either provide this trigger warning that in some capacity is going to prevent people from experiencing emotional responses to it, or I'm going to have to do my best to work with somebody so that we can get what they want to say across without using words that society can't handle, right? And I almost want to say, like, if you really want change and you really want to support survivors, then is it not okay to be so uncomfortable for 30 minutes and get a glimpse of what their life was like? But that's my personal opinion, and that's not how the event is run. because we want children to feel welcome there. We want parents to feel safe bringing their children there, and we want to have that introductory kind of space that you're talking about, right? The unfortunate part is that we don't have those continued spaces for survivors, right? So you can come and you can share your story, but I need you to use language that is going to be safe enough for other people, right? And so there's a line in Selena's speech that like is reflective of that, and that's the silence that saved others is what harmed me, right? And so whether it's your own family not having the language to talk about the sexual violence or historical abuse that happened, and so people just don't say anything because they're afraid that what they're going to say is going to cause more harm, that leaves someone feeling silenced and wondering what are the thoughts that are going around. Or whether it's as a community, we tiptoe around these like harsh realities and these terrible things that happen, but for whose benefit? Because the survivor's already gone through it. So you're saying the community, you're there because you want to make a change. You're there because you want to hear survivors, but you want to only hear what you can handle. And that's what I struggle with.
And that's why Jessica was my filter for my speech. Because now it can be read to the public.
To figure out that line where people are invited to sit with their discomfort.
Oh, because I was going to talk raw.
Yeah. Well,
The story is my story.
Yes.
But Jessica's a lot more sophisticated than I am.
It's not sophisticated. That's the unfortunate part, right? Like, I think the true value of what Selena has to say comes from the words that she is comfortable using.
Right.
But I don't think that the world is ready to hear them. And I think that's the really unfortunate, like I want to personally, like this is just Jessica's view, but I feel like for me, I want to show my respect and my admiration for where Selena has gone by hearing her story the way she wants to tell it.
Right.
Right. But I also know the response and the feedback we receive from the community when things are told the way survivors want to tell them.
Well, when it's open to a wide range of attendees, you have folks who will have a wide range of, I guess, spoons to deal with it, or background expectations of different things. So you'll have some people who are like ready for that gritty and need it so bad. And there will be other folks who are not prepared for that or have different kind of feelings around, I don't know, politeness or social etiquette or something like that. That would make it so they can't hear it at all. That's difficult. That's a difficult thing to balance. I'm a fan of the gritty, and it's also a public park. And I feel like that's a great space to be gritty. But I know not everybody agrees with that. So
I think this can also be one of these like eyes to the future thing, right? And if in every event and in every space we can push a little bit, right? Like it's great that you guys can work together to like you can share your story and you can massage it so that people can take in what they can take in, and maybe we can move that envelope a little bit further. And then next year, things that have resonated will continue to resonate in people's minds, and you can keep pulling those conversations forward and forward. Because, like, I think about the difference between this. Okay, I wasn't alive in the 70s, full disclosure, but like I do remember the 90s and the things that we could talk about and couldn't even be talked about, right? And then versus the 2000s and the things that we can actually name and say, yes, this is a real thing that happens. Because how are you supposed to ever expose something if you can't bring light to it, right? If it just stays in the darkness and stays in that kind of like festering space.
Fester. Yeah.
Yeah. So at least by bringing the conversation and pushing the envelope, sometimes we can create some like long game stuff. And I wonder if sometimes as people involved in change work, we lose sight of the this work started before our lifetime, and will probably continue after our lifetime. And that doesn't mean that we get a pass on doing any of the work, but it's everybody shows up to the best of their ability and tries to move the conversation. Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm. And can you swear on your radio show?
I believe we're played somewhere around midnight, so we can't use any hate speech unless we're quoting someone that we're criticizing for using hate speech, We can use a certain number of swear words, but I think I have to let the station know about it ahead of time. I think if you drop like 1 or 2, I can pretend it didn't happen, and we can all pretend that we're not hearing me say it right now.
So, do you mind if I share? Okay, so we were standing out front of a coffee shop, and we were talking about, when Selena reached out for help, and she said, I couldn't have sex with my boyfriend and then go home and be fucked by my father when those people walked out. And I instantly was like, okay, like I felt like right now I'm supposed to be here with Selena, right? But instantly I felt that need to be like, okay, now I need to, are they okay? Right? Can they handle it? Can they handle hearing this? Right? And so to me, like I always struggle with that because someone can say I was sexually assaulted as a child. And I can go to my safe spot and I can be like, okay, they had a creepy uncle who put their hand on their thigh and that's where it stopped.
And then just disconnect yourself from that statement.
Or we can use language that connects to people and their experiences. And then that is part of their healing journey. But it's also an eye-opener to like the reality of what people are living with and what's happening. Right? So that's where I struggle with, I want people to come and feel supported, but I also want people to come and be educated about the realities of what we don't hear.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's like a push and pull all the time. Like I don't want people to leave feeling worse off, but at the same time, I don't want people to leave without some kind of transformation taking place. So whether it's like, wow, that hurt and it, impacted me, but then I reached out to work through that, or, I heard what was happening and I continued on my day and it never really impacted me because I was able to say in my own little safe space or interpret what I heard that I was comfortable with.
Well, I'm glad that you shared that bit in a direct way, because I think potentially other people at the table, and most definitely people who will be listening to this, multiple people will hear that and might be the first time they've heard about someone disclosing that and that level of bluntness. So I really appreciate the two of you crafting something that can be shared more broadly and openly, but also being willing to share it in a small portion of the direct language for this too. We are pretty much at the end of our time. So I really appreciate, Selena, you being here and talk about yourself as a parent and what Take Back the Night means to you and all this amazing stuff. Jessica, thanks for putting this event together. And thanks to the both of you for being such an amazing team to co-craft this narrative that folks will get to hear about. And Heather, thanks for being here to talk about consent as well and like different ways of working with different age groups and what that means. So thank you.
Thank you.